In a quiet gallery in Athens, a shapeless lump of corroded green bronze rests inside a shallow glass case. It looks like nothing important at all, a battered fist of metal that spent 2,000 years beneath the sea. For a very long time it drew little attention, overshadowed by the gold and marble treasures displayed all around it. And yet, hidden inside this ruined and unremarkable object is something that should not exist. Not here, not in the ancient world. Turn a modern scanner upon it, and the thick corrosion slowly resolves into wheels, into fine teeth, into interlocking gears. Dozens of them cut by hand, meshed together with a mechanical precision we usually associate only with clocks and machines. This is not simply a statue, not a coin, and certainly not a piece of temple jewelry. It is nothing less than a calculating engine. Built from bronze in a Greek workshop, it could model the heavens and reckon the passage of time across the years. Nothing else remotely like it survives from all of antiquity, and nothing would appear again for more than 1,000 years. We call it the Antikythera Mechanism, named after the small island in the Aegean near which it was found. It is, by any honest measure, the oldest known analog computer, an intricate machine of turning gears and dials. And for well over a century now, it has forced us to rewrite what we thought the ancients could ever do. This is the story of a machine that arrived to us across the water from the deep past, like a strange and urgent message we very nearly missed. The strange story of its return begins in the spring of 1900. In the blue water off a lonely Greek island. A crew of Greek sponge divers, blown far off course by a sudden storm, sheltered in the lee of Antikythera. While they were waiting for the wind to fall, one of them descended in a heavy canvas suit and copper helmet. 60 meters down, in the cold green gloom of the seabed, he saw a strange and unexpected field of shapes. Bronze arms, marble limbs, and horse heads lay scattered across the slope, a whole drowned cargo of statues. He surfaced in a sudden panic, certain that he had found a heap of rotting bodies on the bottom. What he had actually found was an ancient shipwreck, a Roman-era vessel lost at sea around the 1st century B.C. It had gone down carrying looted Greek treasures, priceless bronzes and marbles, bound for the wealthy markets of Italy. Over the following months, the divers raised statue after statue in one of the first great underwater excavations ever attempted. It was dangerous work in primitive gear, and at least one diver died and others were crippled for the haul. The finds were shipped to Athens, where scholars marveled at the recovered sculptures and set carefully about restoring them. And among all the marble and bronze, almost entirely overlooked, lay a few crusted lumps that no one could explain. One of them would sit quietly forgotten in a museum storeroom for 2 full years until it broke apart and revealed a wheel of teeth. In 1902, some months after the treasures first came ashore, one of the corroded lumps split open on its own. Inside the cracked bronze, quite unmistakable, sat a toothed gear wheel, the kind you would only find in a machine. An archaeologist named Valerios Stais happened to notice it and understood at once that something here was deeply wrong. Gears like this belonged to the modern world, to clockmakers and engineers, not to the distant age of Caesar. The find was simply too strange to place, and for a long while it defied every reasonable explanation. Some suspected it had somehow fallen into the wreck much later, an intruder from a more recent century, but the incrustation binding it to the ancient debris told plainly that it had gone down with the ship. The fragments were fragile, cracked, and badly clogged, their delicate inner workings hidden beneath layers of corrosion. Scholars could dimly see gears and faint traces of inscriptions, but could not yet read the machine as a whole. So for half a century, the mechanism remained a curiosity, admired, argued over, and fundamentally not understood. It sat there in the museum like a sealed book, its pages fused tightly together by the sea. To open it up without destroying it, science would first need tools that had not yet been invented, and so the mechanism would have to wait, patient in its case, for a way to be seen without being cut apart. The first person to seriously crack the puzzle was a historian of science named Derek de Solla Price. Beginning in the 1950s, he studied the fragile fragments for years, quietly convinced they held a rational machine. Working closely with a Greek physicist, he turned to X-rays, letting the radiation see through the solid bronze. For the very first time, the buried gears cast their shadows onto a plate, their teeth countable at last. Price patiently counted teeth, traced the gear trains, and in 1974 published a bold reconstruction of the device. He argued that it was a calculating machine for the sun, the moon, and the wider motions of the sky. His work was genuinely visionary but incomplete, and some doubted a single ancient device could really do so much. The real breakthrough came only decades later with the powerful tools of modern medicine and heavy industry. In the 2000s, an international team brought a massive X-ray machine to the surviving fragments in Athens. Using computed tomography, they slowly built a full three-dimensional scan of the hidden interior, slice by slice. Suddenly, the buried gears could be seen in full, their teeth counted exactly, their turning axles traced. And on the corroded inner surfaces, high-resolution imaging revealed thousands of tiny, incised characters, a buried instruction manual. Decade by patient decade, the sealed book was finally being read, without a single cut of the saw. What emerged from those detailed scans was a machine of astonishing purpose, nothing less than a model of time itself. On the front, a large dial showed the zodiac and the calendar, the sun's slow path through the year. A pointer tracked the sun across the 12 signs, marking the turn of the seasons as the wheels turned within. Another pointer followed the moon, and a small rotating ball is thought to have shown its changing phase. On the back, great spiral dials laid out the deeper rhythms that govern the entire Greek sense of time. One spiral traced the Metonic cycle, the 19 long years in which sun and moon realign their calendars. This was the great problem of the ancient calendar, fitting the moon's months neatly into the solar year. The mechanism solved it entirely in bronze, turning the tangled reckoning of priests into the smooth motion of gears. Another dial tracked a 4-year cycle, naming in turn the sequence of athletic games across the Greek world. Among them stood the Olympiad, the count of Olympic years that ordered the calendars of the scattered city-states. Here was a machine that knew not only the distant heavens, but the festivals and civic life below. Turn a single handle, and centuries of careful astronomy unspooled through its dials in perfect and silent order. It was, in the end, a portable cosmos, a whole working library of the sky reduced to spinning wheels of shaped metal. The most haunting of all its powers was surely the ability to look ahead and predict eclipses. On the lower back of the machine, a great spiral charted the Saros cycle of the moon and the sun. The Saros is a long rhythm of about 18 years, after which eclipses repeat in a familiar recurring pattern. The Babylonians had spent long centuries recording eclipses, learning this cycle through patient watching of the night sky. The mechanism took that hard-won knowledge and built it directly into gears, mechanizing the wisdom of generations. Its dial could name the very month of a coming eclipse, and even the likely hour of the day. Small markings are thought to have told whether an eclipse would be of the sun or of the moon. To an ancient observer, this must have felt almost like holding the future of the sky in the hands. And the makers went further still, reaching for the moon's true uneven motion across the crowded heavens. The moon does not glide at a single steady pace. It visibly hurries and slows along its path. To capture this, the mechanism used a clever pairing of two gears mounted slightly off-center from one another. One wheel drove another through a pin riding in a slot, cleverly speeding and slowing the turning. In bronze, the ancient makers had modeled an irregularity of the heavens that even Newton himself would later study. To understand why this small machine still astonishes engineers, you have to look at how it was actually built. Inside its slim wooden case wound perhaps 30 or more bronze gears, layered on shared axles and plates. Every single tooth was cut by hand, filed down to a rough triangle, and yet it meshed cleanly with its neighbor. The trains of gears divided and multiplied motion, translating one turn of a handle into many precise rhythms. Most remarkable of all was the pin and slot device, an epicyclic arrangement rarely even imagined so early in history. One gear was mounted upon another, riding around it, its motion subtly varying as the whole pair revolved. This is the same principle that much later clockmakers would rediscover to model the wandering motion of the planets. In the mechanism, it produced the strangely uneven speed of the moon, a subtle and hard-won truth of the sky. The precision required here is severe. A single tooth cut wrong by a hair throws the whole calculation astray. This was not a rough toy at all, but a finely tuned instrument, plainly the work of a master's hand. Nothing about it suggests a first attempt. It carries the quiet confidence of a mature and practiced craft. Somewhere behind it must lie earlier machines, lost prototypes, and busy workshops that trained such careful hands. And yet of that lineage, of the makers and their teachers, almost nothing at all now survives. So who exactly made it? The honest answer is that we do not know and may never know for certain. The ship went down around the 1st century BC, and the mechanism itself was likely made not long before. Its careful astronomy echoes the work of Hipparchus, the great Greek astronomer who studied the moon's uneven motion. Hipparchus worked on the island of Rhodes, then a famous and busy center of learning in the eastern Mediterranean. Some believe the mechanism was designed within his tradition, perhaps in a Rhodian workshop that knew his theories well. Others point much further back to Archimedes, who is said to have built bronze spheres that modeled the moving heavens. Ancient writers describe exactly such devices, planetaria that showed the sun and moon and planets in slow motion. If those old accounts are true, the Antikythera Mechanism may be the sole survivor of a whole lost family. But we must be careful here, for every name attached to it remains a guess, unproven by any signature. The inscriptions name months and stars and cycles, but never the craftsman who actually cut the gears. It may have been made for a wealthy patron, a teacher, or a great temple. We simply cannot say. What is certain is that It was no accident, no fluke, but the ripe fruit of a deliberate tradition. A tradition with skilled hands, refined mathematical theory, and long unbroken generations of quiet practice standing silently behind it. And here we finally reach the true mystery, which is not the machine, but the deep silence that follows it. After the Antikythera Mechanism, nothing of comparable complexity appears in the record for well over 1,000 years. There is no hoard of Greek gearwork, no Roman calculating engine, no chain of copies down the long centuries. The knowledge that cut those fine teeth and meshed those trains seems to simply fade quietly from the world. Geared machines of such precision would not clearly return until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. For over a full millennium it stands utterly alone, a single lone point of light in a long darkness. This is the genuine loss here, not an object that we somehow cannot rebuild, but a whole living lineage of craft that dissolved, for we truly can rebuild it. The mechanism is demanding, but it is understood, and it has been faithfully remade. The historian Michael Wright spent long years constructing a full working model from the evidence of the fragments. Later, researchers led by Tony Freeth refined the reconstruction, carefully matching the gears to the newest detailed scans. A modern machinist, working only with hand tools, has recreated the gears to show that ancient methods truly suffice. Turn the handle on any of these models and the dials move, the eclipses come, the calendar advances. The machine works, and it always did. What we cannot recover is the whole vanished world of workshops and teachers that first made it possible. That is the honest shape of this real mystery, and it is far quieter than the old legends would have it. There is no need at all for miracles here, no visitors from the stars, no impossible or inexplicable power. The Antikythera Mechanism was made by human hands from ordinary bronze. With a skill that we can measure and admire, we can now scan it, read it, and build it again, and in doing so we have deeply honored its makers. But we cannot ever bring back the countless generations of quiet craft that its perfection so plainly implies. Somewhere in the ancient world once stood workshops we will never see, and teachers whose names are wholly gone. They patiently passed their knowledge hand to hand until a fragile thread of skill wound through the centuries. And then, for reasons we do not fully understand, that thread was cut and the precious knowledge scattered. What sank off Antikythera was not only a machine, but the silent proof of a tradition that was already fading. It is a sober reminder that knowledge is fragile, that even brilliance can be forgotten if no one carries it on. The gears survived only by accident, resting in the dark water, while the living craft above them slowly died. We have finally learned at last to read the machine, and it has quietly taught us how much a whole civilization can lose. And so the Antikythera Mechanism endures, not as a riddle without any answer, but as a lasting and humbling lesson in what we let slip away.